Welcome back, everyone. We're kicking things off today with something a little different, a deep dive into a fascinating corner of the gaming world I'm calling Game Topics. We're going to be talking about Souls-like games today. You know, those games that are infamous for their difficulty.
Yeah, they've definitely got a reputation for being brutally challenging.
But they've also got a huge following. I mean, people absolutely love these games. So what is it about Souls-like games that makes them so compelling, even with that, that fearsome reputation for difficulty?
Well, I think one of the key things is that the difficulty isn't just there for the sake of it. It's not just about, making the game hard just to be mean.
Right.
It's actually a very deliberate design choice. They're using difficulty as a way to create a really powerful sense of achievement, a sense of mastery that I think is really unique to this style of game.
Okay, so it's not just about being hard for the sake of being hard. There's a method to the madness. But how does that actually work in practice? I mean, how do you design a game to be difficult in a way that's actually rewarding?
Let's take the level design in Dark Souls, for instance.
Okay.
You're not just talking about creating visually impressive environments. They're very deliberately intricate and interconnected, almost like a labyrinth. And the enemies are placed in a way that they will punish you if you rush in blindly.
Oh, yeah.
You constantly have this sense of tension, of being lost and vulnerable.
Oh, absolutely. It's like every corner could be hiding some terrifying enemy waiting to ambush you.
Exactly. And when you finally find a shortcut or you figure out the optimal path through an area, there's this incredible sense of relief and satisfaction. Almost like the game is rewarding you for your patience and your observation skills, your willingness to learn from your mistakes.
It's a very subtle but powerful form of positive reinforcement. So the level design itself is almost like a puzzle that you have to solve. And the reward isn't just progressing through the game, but also that feeling of mastery over the environment.
Precisely. And that sense of mastery is further reinforced by the combat system. So, Souls-like games, they don't have a traditional difficulty setting.
Right.
The difficulty is actually baked into the mechanics themselves.
So it's not about making enemies hit harder or giving them more health. It's about demanding a certain level of precision, timing, and strategy from the player.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about, for example, the stamina management system in Dark Souls.
Oh, yeah.
Every action that you take, attacking, blocking, even dodging, consumes stamina. If you run out, you're left wide open, vulnerable to attack.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. It's like you're running a marathon, but you also have to fight a dragon at the finish line.
Exactly. It
Oh.
forces you to be mindful, to think about your actions, plan your attacks carefully, and you've always got to keep an eye on your stamina bar.
It's definitely a high-risk, high-reward system. One that, like you said, punishes recklessness and rewards that careful planning.
Yes. And when you finally master it, there's this incredible feeling of flow, of being in complete control of your character and your actions.
It's not just about overcoming a challenge. It's about learning a whole new way of playing.
Right. And then you have games like Bloodborne, which take this concept of demanding combat and just crank it up to 11.
Oh, yeah. Bloodborne is definitely not for the faint of heart. The combat is so fast-paced and aggressive. You feel like you're constantly on the offensive, dodging and weaving between attacks, always looking for that perfect opening to strike.
Exactly. And unlike Dark Souls, where you might be able to rely on a shield, Bloodborne encourages a much more aggressive playstyle. You are rewarded for being aggressive, for pressing the attack and taking risks.
Yeah, it's like the game is saying, don't just react, anticipate, don't just defend, attack. It's terrifying, but also exhilarating when you can actually pull it off.
Right, right. And this all feeds back into that core design philosophy we were talking about, that the difficulty is designed to push you, to force you to learn and adapt, and ultimately reward you with a sense of mastery you don't really get from other games.
Okay, so we've talked about the level design and the combat mechanics in Souls-like games, but what about the storytelling? These games are known for their very unconventional approach to narrative.
Yeah, you're not going to find those long cutscenes or exposition dumps in a Souls-like game.
Right.
They tell their stories in a much more subtle and environmental way.
So instead of telling you the story directly, they give you clues and let you figure it out for yourself, like an archaeologist or something.
Exactly. You're piecing together the history of this lost civilization, right? From these little fragments you find. In Dark Souls, for example, you're exploring this world that's on the brink of collapse. And the story is being told through item descriptions, through environmental details, the cryptic dialogue of the few NPCs you encounter.
Right. It's like every little detail, every item description would be a clue to a larger story. I remember finding this old rusty ring in Dark Souls. And the description was something like, a ring given to a knight by his beloved before he set out on a doomed quest. It doesn't tell you the whole story, but it gives you this little glimpse into the past, into the lives of the people who inhabited this world before, before whatever happened.
And that's the beauty of it, right? It sparks your imagination. It makes you want to fill in those blanks. You want to piece together that narrative yourself.
It's like you're not just a player, you're also like a detective,
Uh-huh.
a historian, an interpreter.
Exactly. And this approach to storytelling really creates a sense of mystery and intrigue that's really compelling. You're constantly discovering these new pieces of the puzzle. And even when you think you've figured it all out, there's always something more to uncover.
It's like the story's unfolding not just in the game, but in your own mind as you try to make sense of it all.
Right. And it really encourages players to discuss their theories, share their interpretations, and, kind of collectively piece together this lore of the game world, which, again, kind of feeds into that sense of community that we were talking about earlier.
And speaking of lore, maybe we should define that term a bit more clearly. What exactly do we mean when we talk about lore in the context of Souls-like games?
Yeah. So lore is basically the backstory, the mythology, the history of the game world. It's all that stuff that might not be explicitly stated in the main narrative, but it's there if you were willing to dig for it.
So it's like the stuff that's hidden beneath the surface, the stuff that you have to really search for and piece together. And in Souls-like games, the lore is often, fragmented, cryptic,
Right.
but it's also incredibly rich and detailed.
Absolutely. It's like an iceberg where the main story is just the tip. And there's this whole hidden depth beneath the surface just waiting to be explored.
I'm starting to see why these games have such dedicated fans who will spend hours, dissecting every detail, every item description, every line of dialogue, just to try and piece together the full story.
It's not just about playing the game. It's about unraveling its mysteries, about piecing together this lore and creating your own understanding of its world and its history.
So you're not just a player, you're also a scholar, you're a historian, you're an archaeologist, you're like Indiana Jones with a controller.
Precisely. And that's a level of engagement that you just don't get from most games.
Okay, so we've established that Souls-like games are tough, but fair, and that their storytelling is more like an archaeological dig than a Hollywood movie. But let's get specific. How about we dive into a few examples and see how these concepts play out in some of the most iconic games in the genre?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with the granddaddy of them all, Dark Souls. This is the game that basically laid the foundation for the entire genre.
And gave birth to 1,000 memes about dying repeatedly.
Exactly. But beyond the memes, Dark Souls is just a masterclass in environmental storytelling and, like we were talking about, using difficulty to enhance player engagement. We've already talked a bit about the Undead Burg, but let's look at another iconic area, Blighttown.
Oh no, not Blighttown.
Yeah.
Everybody dreads Blighttown.
I know. Everybody treads Blighttown. It's this poisonous swamp filled with toxic enemies, narrow walkways, and just a general sense of oppressive dread. But think about it. Why is it so memorable?
Well, for one thing, it's just visually striking. It's so different from the other areas in the game.
Exactly. The art design is incredible, and it really creates this sense of being in a hostile alien environment.
And the enemies are just creepy. Those giant mosquitoes and the toxic dart blowers and the things, whatever those things are, that crawl around on the walls.
It's just a masterclass in creating a sense of unease, of dread through enemy design.
And then there's the level design itself. It's so vertical and so claustrophobic. You're constantly climbing ladders, crossing these narrow bridges, and just trying not to fall into the poison muck below.
It's designed to make you feel vulnerable, disoriented, and just constantly on edge.
Yeah, it's a really effective way to ratchet up the tension.
Right. And yet there's also this strange beauty to it.
Yeah, I actually kind of love Blighttown now that I think about it. It's so
Yeah.
atmospheric.
Right. It's a perfect example of how Souls-like games use environmental storytelling to create truly memorable experiences. Blighttown isn't just a level, it's a place. It has its own history, its own atmosphere, its own unique identity.
Okay, so Blighttown is a masterclass in environmental storytelling. But what about the difficulty? I mean, it's notoriously hard to navigate, even for experienced Souls players. How does the difficulty actually enhance the experience?
Well, think about the narrow walkways, the poisonous enemies, the constant threat of falling. All of these things force you to be incredibly careful, to plan every move and really pay attention to your surroundings.
It's like the game is saying, hey, you want to get through this? You better earn it.
Exactly. And when you finally reach the bottom of Blighttown and you find that bonfire,
Oh, that sweet, sweet bonfire.
there's this incredible sense of relief and accomplishment. You've survived one of the most challenging areas in the game, and you really feel like you've earned that victory.
And it's not just about the feeling of accomplishment. It's about the memories you create along the way. I'll never forget my first time through Blighttown. Stumbling around in the dark, getting poisoned every 5 seconds, and wondering if I would ever see the light of day again.
And that's what makes Souls-like games so special, right? They create these shared experiences, these experiences that we can talk about, laugh about, and bond over long after we finish playing them.
All right, so we've explored the depths of Blighttown. What other examples can you give me of how Souls-like games use difficulty and environmental storytelling to create truly memorable experiences?
Well, how about we shift gears from the gothic horror of Dark Souls to the gothic horror of Bloodborne?
Okay.
This game is a masterclass in creating a sense of dread and tension through its atmosphere, its enemy design, and its incredibly fast-paced combat.
Oh, I love Bloodborne. It's so visceral.
Exactly. And that viscerality is achieved through a combination of factors. Let's start with the setting.
Yharnam, right. It's this Gothic city shrouded in perpetual night, cobblestone streets, towering cathedrals. You always feel like there's danger lurking around every corner.
And like a Victorian nightmare come to life.
And the enemies are terrifying. Werewolves, giant spiders, monstrous hunters, those creepy doll things.
The enemy design in Bloodborne is incredible. It's both beautiful and grotesque, and it really taps into our primal fears of the unknown.
And the music. It's so haunting and melancholic. It really adds to the overall atmosphere of dread and despair.
The music is definitely a key part of the Bloodborne experience. It's not just background music, it's part of the world itself, and it really helps to create that immersive and unsettling atmosphere.
Okay, so Bloodborne is a masterclass in atmosphere and enemy design. But how does it use difficulty to enhance the player experience?
Well, think about the combat system. It's incredibly fast-paced, aggressive, and it really forces you to be on your toes. Unlike Dark Souls, where you can often rely on a shield to block incoming attacks, Bloodborne encourages a much more offensive playstyle.
Yeah, you're constantly dodging, weaving, parrying attacks. You're always looking for that perfect opening to strike.
And if you make a mistake, you get punished. Hard.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. One wrong move and you're toast.
Exactly. But that's what makes the combat so exhilarating. It's a constant dance of death, and when you finally master it, there's this incredible feeling of flow and power.
It's like you're dancing with the enemy, anticipating their moves and exploiting their weaknesses.
Precisely. And that's what makes Bloodborne so rewarding. It's a game that demands your full attention, your reflexes, your strategic thinking. And when you finally overcome a challenging boss or a particularly difficult area, the sense of accomplishment is incredible.
So Bloodborne is a masterclass in creating a sense of dread and tension through its atmosphere, its enemy design, and its fast-paced combat. What about Elden Ring? It's a much more open-world game compared to Dark Souls or Bloodborne. How does it approach the concepts of difficulty and environmental storytelling?
Elden Ring is an interesting case study because it takes the core elements of Souls-like games and it applies them to this vast open world. And it does so incredibly well. The world of Elden Ring is absolutely massive. It's filled with secrets, hidden dungeons, optional bosses, just waiting to be discovered.
And yet it still manages to retain that sense of challenge and mystery that we've been talking about.
Exactly. The difficulty in Elden Ring comes not just from the enemies themselves, but also from the sheer scale and complexity of the world. You're constantly exploring, discovering new areas, encountering new challenges.
It's like the world itself is the main boss.
In a way, yes, and the environmental storytelling is equally impressive. The world of Elden Ring is filled with these subtle clues and hints about its history, its mythology, and the events that led to its current state.
For example, what kind of clues are we talking about?
Well, take the Legacy Dungeons, for instance. These are massive, intricately designed areas. Each one is themed around a specific demigod. And as you explore these dungeons, you start to piece together the stories of these demigods, their motivations, their relationships with each other, and their ultimate downfall.
So you're not just exploring a dungeon, you're unraveling a story.
Exactly. And the way the story is told is so subtle and nuanced. You might find a crumbling statue, a cryptic inscription, or even just the way the enemies are arranged in a particular area.
And it's up to you to connect the dots, to interpret the clues and draw your own conclusions.
Precisely. And that's what makes Elden Ring so rewarding. It's a game that trusts you to figure things out for yourself, and it rewards your curiosity and your attention to detail with a rich and rewarding narrative experience.
Okay, so we've talked about how Souls-like games use difficulty and environmental storytelling to create truly memorable experiences. But there's another aspect to these games I think is worth exploring, the sense of community they foster.
Oh, absolutely. Souls-like games are notoriously difficult, but that difficulty actually brings players together in a really unique way.
It's like a shared trauma that bonds you for life.
Exactly. You go through these incredibly challenging experiences together, and you come out the other side with a sense of camaraderie, a sense of shared accomplishment that you just don't get from other games.
I remember spending hours trying to beat Ornstein and Smoke in Dark Souls, and finally succeeding with the help of a random player I summoned online. It was such an exhilarating moment, and it really cemented that sense of community for me.
And that's just one example. The Souls-like community is filled with stories like that, players helping each other out, sharing tips and strategies, and just generally supporting each other through the toughest challenges the games have to offer.
And it's not just about online interactions. There's also this incredible culture of fan art, lore discussions, community-created content that surrounds these games.
It's really amazing to see how passionate and dedicated the Souls-like community is. They're constantly dissecting every detail of the games, creating their own interpretations of the lore, and sharing their love for these games with the world.
It's like they've created their own little universe around these games.
Yeah,
And it's a universe that's welcoming, supportive, and incredibly creative.
exactly. And I think that's a testament to the power of these games. They're not just games, they're experiences that connect people, inspire creativity, and foster a sense of community that's truly unique.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the challenging gameplay, the subtle storytelling, the incredible sense of community that surrounds these games. But there's one more question I want to ask you. Why? Why do people love these games so much, even though they're so difficult?
That's a great question, and I think the answer lies in the unique blend of challenge, reward, and player agency that these games offer.
Okay, let's break that down. How does challenge play into this?
Well, as we've already discussed, Souls-like games are hard, but they're not unfairly hard. The difficulty is always fair, and it's always designed to teach you something about the game.
So it's not about punishing the player. It's about pushing them to learn and grow.
Exactly. And when you finally overcome a challenging boss or a difficult area, the sense of accomplishment is incredible. You feel like you've earned your victory, and that feeling is incredibly addictive.
It's like climbing a mountain. It's tough, it's exhausting, but when you finally reach the summit, the view is breathtaking.
Exactly. And then there's the reward aspect. Souls-like games are filled with incredible loot, powerful weapons, unique armor sets, and the best gear is often hidden behind the toughest challenges.
So the game is constantly dangling this carrot in front of you, saying, if you want the best stuff, you're going to have to work for it.
Exactly. And then there's player agency. Souls-like games give you a lot of freedom to approach challenges in your own way. You can choose your own build, your own weapons, your own play style.
So you're not just following a predetermined path, you're forging your own path through the game.
Exactly. And that sense of freedom and ownership is incredibly empowering. It makes you feel like you're really in control of your destiny in the game.
So to sum it all up, people love Souls-like games because they offer a unique blend of challenge, reward, and player agency. They're games that demand your full attention, your skill, your creativity. But they also reward you with a sense of accomplishment, a feeling of mastery, and a connection to a community of like-minded players that's unlike anything else in gaming.
Exactly. And I think that's why these games have had such a profound impact on the gaming landscape. They've shown us that difficulty can be a good thing, that subtlety can be more effective than exposition, and that player agency can lead to truly unforgettable experiences. When we talk about the difficulty of Souls-like games, it's easy to focus on the surface level, like the tough enemies, the intricate level design, the unforgiving combat system. But I think there's a deeper psychological layer at play here as well.
Ooh, I like where this is going. Are we going to dive into the psychology of pain and suffering? Just kidding. But seriously, what is going on in our brains when we're getting our butts kicked by a boss for the 10th time in a row?
Well, think about it this way. Overcoming a difficult challenge, whether it's in a video game or in real life, triggers a release of dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's associated with pleasure, reward, and motivation.
So basically, our brains are wired to enjoy overcoming obstacles.
Exactly. And the harder the obstacle, the greater that sense of satisfaction when we finally overcome it.
Which explains why I feel such a rush of adrenaline when I finally beat that boss that's been giving me nightmares.
Exactly. And that feeling is amplified in Souls-like games because the difficulty is so deliberate and so well crafted. The game isn't just trying to frustrate you, it's trying to teach you something.
It's like a really tough, but ultimately rewarding teacher. The kind that pushes you to be your best.
That's a great analogy. And the more you learn, the more you master the game's mechanics, the greater the sense of satisfaction you feel.
So it becomes this positive feedback loop. The harder the challenge, the more rewarding it feels to overcome it,
Yeah.
which makes you want to tackle even greater challenges.
Precisely. And that's what makes these games so addictive. It's not just about the gameplay itself, it's about that feeling of mastery, of competence, of pushing yourself beyond your limits.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the storytelling aspect? We
Mhm.
talked about how Souls-like games use environmental storytelling and lore to create this sense of mystery and intrigue.
Oh.
How does that tie into the player psychology?
Well, think about the power of a good mystery. We are naturally curious creatures. We're drawn to stories that make us think, that challenge us to piece together the clues and figure things out for ourselves.
It's like that feeling of satisfaction you get when you finally solve a riddle or finish a crossword puzzle.
Exactly. And Souls-like games tap into that same psychological need for closure, for understanding, for making sense of the world around us.
So instead of just spoon-feeding us the story, they give us the pieces and let us assemble the puzzle ourselves.
Precisely. And because there's often no single definitive answer, it encourages players to discuss their theories, to share their interpretations, and to kind of collectively piece together the lore of the game world.
Which creates this incredible sense of community and shared discovery.
Exactly. It's like we're all archaeologists working together to excavate the ruins of a lost civilization.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've talked about the psychology of challenge, the allure of mystery. But there's another aspect of the Souls-like experience I think is worth exploring. That feeling of immersion.
Mm.
You know? These games have a way of transporting you to another world, making you feel like you're really there, experiencing these challenges firsthand. How do they achieve that?
I think it's a combination of factors. The environmental storytelling we've already discussed plays a huge role, of course. When the world feels real and lived in, it's easier to suspend your disbelief and get lost in the experience.
So it's not just about creating pretty graphics, it's about creating a world that feels believable, that has a history that makes sense.
Exactly. And that sense of believability is enhanced by the way the game mechanics interact with the world.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about the way stamina management works in Dark Souls. Every action you take, from slinging your sword to dodging an attack, consumes stamina. And if you run out, you're left vulnerable.
Yeah, it's like the game is saying, hey, you're not a superhero, you're a human being with limitations.
No. Exactly. And that sense of physicality of having to manage your resources and think strategically about your actions makes the world feel more real, more grounded.
It's like you're really there, feeling the weight of your armor, the strain of your muscles, the exhaustion of battle.
Precisely. And it's not just about the physical mechanics. The sound design also plays a huge role in creating a sense of immersion.
Oh, yeah. The sound effects in these games are incredible. The clang of metal on metal, the roar of a boss monster,
Yeah.
the eerie silence of an abandoned dungeon. It all adds to the atmosphere.
Exactly. The sound design creates a sense of place, of atmosphere, of being surrounded by this living, breathing world.
And then there's the music.
Mhm.
It's often haunting, melancholic, and deeply atmospheric. It adds this incredible emotional depth to the experience, and that further enhances the feeling of exploring this lost and forgotten world.
Right. The music doesn't just underscore the action, it becomes part of the narrative itself. It sets the mood, builds tension, and evokes a wide range of emotions, from wonder to dread to this bittersweet sense of longing.
So it's not just about creating a visually impressive world. It's about engaging all of the player's senses,
Yep.
making them feel like they're truly present in that game world.
Exactly. And that level of immersion is something that very few games achieve.
Okay, we've talked about the psychology of challenge, the allure of mystery, the feeling of immersion, but let's bring it back to the games themselves. We've touched on a few examples already, but I'd love to dive a bit deeper into some specific moments or areas that really showcase the brilliance of Souls-like game design.
I'm happy to oblige. Where should we start?
How about we go back to Dark Souls for a moment? We talked about Blighttown, but there's another area that always sticks with me. Anor Londo.
Ah, Anor Londo, the city of the gods. It's such a striking contrast to the dark and oppressive environments that you've encountered earlier in the game.
It's like stepping into a completely different world. It's grand, majestic, and bathed in this warm, golden light. For a moment, you almost forget you're in a Souls game. Almost.
Right. But then you encounter those archers.
Oh, don't even get me started on those archers. I swear, they have pinpoint accuracy and an unlimited supply of arrows.
They're infamous for a reason, but think about how they're placed in the environment. They're positioned high up on these narrow walkways, forcing you to carefully plan your approach and make use of cover.
And that long, narrow bridge leading up to the main cathedral, it's like a gauntlet designed to test your patience and your dodging skills.
Exactly. And then there's the boss fight at the end of the area.
Ornstein and Smell. Talk about a trial by fire.
They are one of the most iconic boss duos in gaming history. Each one has their own unique moveset and attacks, and they work together seamlessly to keep you on your toes.
It's like fighting a tag team of demigods. You think you've got one figured out, and then the other one comes at you with some crazy attack you've never seen before.
And it forces you to adapt, to change your strategy on the fly, to really master the game's combat mechanics.
It's a brutal but brilliant fight, and when you finally beat them, oh man, that feeling is incredible.
It's a true test of skill and perseverance, and it's a perfect example of how Souls-like games use difficulty to create truly memorable and rewarding experiences.
Okay, so In Orlando is a masterclass in level design, enemy placement, and boss battles. But what about Bloodborne? Is there a particular moment or area that you think really exemplifies the brilliance of its design?
There are so many to choose from. But one that always sticks with me is the fight against Father Gascoigne.
Ah, Father Gascoigne. He's like the first real wall that you hit in the game.
Yeah.
The boss that makes you realize you're not in Kansas anymore.
Exactly. He's fast, he's aggressive, and he hits like a truck. He really pushes you to master the game's unique combat mechanics, especially the parry system.
And the setting for the fight is just perfect. You're battling him in this graveyard, bathed in moonlight, with tombstones and mausoleums all around you.
It's a visually stunning setting,
Yeah.
and it really adds to the tension and atmosphere of the fight.
And then there's the music. It's so haunting and melancholic, and it really adds to the overall sense of tragedy and despair.
The music is definitely a key part of the Bloodborne experience. It's not just background music. It's part of the world itself.
And then there's the twist. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't played the game, but let's just say that Father Gascoigne has a few surprises up his sleeve.
Let's just say that the fight takes an unexpected turn, and it really forces you to adapt and think on your feet.
It's a brilliant fight, and it perfectly encapsulates what makes Bloodborne so special. The challenging but rewarding combat, the haunting atmosphere, and the subtle but effective storytelling.
Exactly. And it's a fight that sticks with you long after you've finished the game.
Okay, we've talked about Dark Souls, we've talked about Bloodborne, what about Elden Ring? Any standout moments or areas that you think really showcase the brilliance of its open world design?
Well, one area that always comes to mind is the Lake of Rot.
Oh no, not the Lake of Rot. That place is a nightmare. It's like a giant festering wound on the face of the world.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but it's also a testament to the incredible creativity and world building of From Software. The Lake of Rot is this vast underground swamp filled with poisonous water, decaying ruins, and some of the most grotesque enemies in the game.
I still have nightmares about those giant flying stingrays with the creepy faces.
They're definitely memorable, but think about how the Lake of Rot is integrated into the world. It's not just some random area thrown in for the sake of challenge. It has a story, a purpose, a connection to the lore of the game world.
Yeah. You learn about the history of the lake, how it was once a place of beauty and abundance,
Yeah.
but was corrupted by some ancient evil.
Exactly, and that backstory adds this whole new layer of depth and meaning to the experience. You're not just exploring a challenging area, you're uncovering a piece of the world's history.
And the way the area is designed, with its winding paths, hidden tunnels, and oppressive atmosphere, it really makes you feel like you're exploring this forbidden and forgotten place.
Exactly, and the fact that it's optional makes it even more special. You don't have to go there, but if you do, you're rewarded with a truly unique and unforgettable experience.
Okay, so we've talked about some specific examples of how Souls-like games use difficulty, environmental storytelling, and world building to create truly memorable experiences. But I want to zoom out a bit and talk about the bigger picture. What impact have these games had on the gaming industry as a whole?
I think it's safe to say that Souls-like games have had a profound impact on game design. They've shown that difficulty can be a good thing, that subtlety can be more effective than exposition, and that player agency can lead to truly unforgettable experiences.
Yeah, they've really challenged those conventions of traditional game design And they've inspired this whole new generation of games that embrace those principles.
Exactly. We're seeing more and more games that incorporate elements of Souls-like design, from the challenging combat to the environmental storytelling to the emphasis on player exploration and discovery.
It's almost like they've created this new subgenre within the action RPG genre.
In a way, yes, and I think that's a testament to the power and influence of these games.
Okay, so they've had a huge impact on game design. But what about their cultural impact? Have these games had a broader impact beyond just the gaming world?
Absolutely. I think Souls-like games have tapped into this cultural zeitgeist that values challenge, perseverance, and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
It's like they're a reflection of the times we live in.
In a way, yes. We live in a world that's increasingly complex and challenging, and these games offer a space where we can confront those challenges head-on and emerge victorious.
And they also offer this sense of community and shared struggle. That's really appealing in a world that can often feel isolating and atomized.
Exactly. The Souls-like community is a testament to the power of these games to connect people, to inspire collaboration, and to foster this sense of shared purpose.
So to sum it all up, Souls-like games are more than just video games. They're cultural artifacts that reflect the challenges and complexities of our time. They're works of art that inspire us, challenge us, and connect us in ways that few other forms of media can.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think the best is yet to come. As developers continue to experiment with the Souls-like formula, I'm excited to see what new and innovative experiences they create.
Me too. It's an exciting time to be a fan of this genre. And for those who haven't yet braved the depths of a Souls-like game, I encourage you to give it a try. You might be surprised at what you discover. It's pretty amazing how much depth there is to these games. We've talked about the challenge, the world building, the community, but it almost feels like we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's always more to uncover, isn't there? And one of the most fascinating aspects, to me at least, is how these games leverage something we don't often associate with difficulty.
Trust.
Trust. You mean like trusting that I won't fall off another cliff for the 100th time?
Well, there's that too.
Yeah.
But no, I'm talking about the trust the developers place in the player. They don't hold your hand. They don't over-explain things. They just trust you to observe, to experiment, and to figure things out on your own. Yeah, that's true. There's no big tutorial at the beginning, right? No quest markers cluttering up the map. You're kind of just thrown into this world and left to your own devices.
Exactly, and that can be incredibly empowering, especially in a gaming landscape where it feels like so many games feel the need to spell everything out for you. Souls-like games, they respect your intelligence, they believe you're capable of learning, of adapting and overcoming those challenges without needing to be constantly spoon-fed information.
And that really ties into that sense of discovery, right? Which is so central to these games. It's not just about finding some new weapon or a hidden area. It's about uncovering the rules of the world, the mechanics of the combat system, even the lore that's kind of hidden in item descriptions and those environmental details we talked about.
Right. The learning process itself becomes its own reward. Each time you figure something out on your own, whether it's a new enemy's attack pattern or a hidden shortcut, you get this little dopamine hit, that feeling of, aha, I got it.
Yeah, and it makes you want to keep exploring, keep experimenting, keep pushing the boundaries of what you know.
Exactly. It creates this like virtuous cycle of curiosity, discovery, and mastery. And that's pretty powerful.
Okay, so we've got this trust factor, this sense of discovery. What else contributes to this feeling of depth in these games?
Well, think about the way these games handle player choice. From the very beginning, you're given all this freedom to customize your character, your build, your playstyle. You can be a nimble rogue who relies on speed and stealth, a heavily armored knight who tanks hits like a champ, or a powerful sorcerer who blasts enemies from afar.
And the game doesn't judge you for those choices, right?
Yeah.
There's no one right way to play. It gives you the tools and lets you figure it out for yourself.
Exactly. And that level of freedom is incredibly rare, especially in games with such complex and interconnected mechanics. You're not just playing the game, you're shaping it, molding it to your own preferences and playstyle.
And that ties back into that sense of ownership we were talking about earlier, right? You're not just a player, you're a creator. You're building your own legend within the game world.
Precisely. And because there are so many different ways to play, so many different builds and strategies to experiment with, it really encourages replayability. You can finish the game once as a sword-wielding warrior, then start a new game as a magic-wielding sorcerer, and have a completely different experience.
It's like you're playing a whole new game.
Mhm.
And that also helps explain why the Souls-like community is so active and engaged. People are constantly sharing their builds, their strategies, their discoveries. It's like a collective effort to map out this vast and intricate landscape of the game.
It's really quite remarkable. And again, it just speaks to the power of these games to inspire that creativity, collaboration, and that sense of shared discovery.
Okay, so we've got the trust factor, the sense of discovery, the player choice. Anything else we should add to our list of why Souls-like games are so damn deep?
Well, I think it's worth mentioning the sheer artistry of these games, from the breathtaking environments to the haunting music, even the intricate character designs. These games are just beautiful both to look at and to listen to.
Oh, absolutely. They're a feast for the senses. I mean, who could forget the first time they saw Anor Londo bathed in that golden light, or heard the mournful strains of Gurman's theme in Bloodborne?
These games are filled with moments of true visual and auditory poetry, and they elevate the entire experience, making it feel like so much more than just a game. They're works of art that stay with you long after you finish playing them.
And I think that's a really good note to end on. We spent this deep dive dissecting the Souls-like genre. We analyze its mechanics, its storytelling, its impact. But ultimately, I think these games are about more than just the sum of their parts. They're about the feelings they evoke, the challenges they present, the journeys they take us on.
And those journeys, they're rarely easy, but they're always rewarding in the end. They teach us about perseverance, about adaptability, about the importance of paying attention, even to the smallest details. And they remind us that even when facing, seemingly overwhelming odds, there's always a way to overcome, to learn, and to grow.
So to all you brave souls out there who are willing to embrace the challenge, to get lost in a world of mystery and wonder, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing yourself beyond your limits. The rewards, I think, are definitely worth the effort.
Couldn't agree more. And who knows, maybe you'll even discover something amazing along the way.